Hi, so this is a short reading of Wilfred Owen's poem, The Parable of the Old Man and the Young. Wilfred Owen, as we know, was a poet who served in World War One. He was British. He was killed in France on November 4th, 1918. And he uses the story of Abraham and Isaac in this poem in a really interesting way, and I want to introduce that to you. I would first take note of the fact that he uses this title parable of the old man and the son and the young. Sorry, so that evokes this idea of a short tale out of which there's some supposed to be something instructive. Parables are used by Christ in the Bible throughout the New Testament, and they aren't always easy to understand. So this story that Owen is taking for this poem, the story of Abraham tested, which we've taken a look at, is from actually the Old Testament. It isn't a parable, but it is a story of sacrifice that people have wondered about, and especially the choices that Abraham is making and that God is asking him to make. So in this poem, uh, Owen, who often begins in the middle of things in media res, picks up this idea of Abram, who is Abraham, of course, rising, claving the wood. He clave the wood and went and took the fire with him and a knife. So this is a preparation here for a sacrifice. It usually would have been a sacrifice of a lamb or some kind of offering to God in the Judaic tradition. And quickly it says, and as they sojourned both of them together. So that is an indication that the father and the son are going together. Isaac, the firstborn, spake and said, My father, behold the preparations, fire and iron, but where the lamb for this burnt offering? And that's an echo of the biblical passage where Isaac does notice that they are going up to do a traditional sacrifice, but there is no sacrifice present. Then Abram bound the youth with belts and straps. I would take note of the language here. Bounding the youth with belts and straps is a kind of a sort of violent image, which he pushes even further when he says, and builded parapets and trenches there. Now, this is about halfway through the poem, and he shifts from this language of belts and straps and tying somebody down to language that is about war, and specifically about the World War I technology of building these sort of makeshift walls that could protect the soldiers, and also the trenching that they did in France to hold the line and to get closer to the battlefield. And so then Owen says that Abram stretched forth the knife to slay his son, when lo, an angel called him out of heaven. And we saw this depicted in the paintings and in the story, that the angel interrupts the killing of Isaac, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram caught in the thicket by its thorns, offer the ram of pride instead of him. So as in the Bible, the angel provides the sacrificial lamb instead of Isaac, and you recognize that this was a kind of test of Abraham. But Owen changes that narrative at the very end in this couplet. So a couplet are two lines that rhyme together. And he says, But the old man would not sow, but slew his son and half the seed of Europe one by one. And so there you feel this very kind of turn immediately to really thinking about the way in which the younger generation was sacrificed in World War One. England lost millions of young men in that war, and the sort of bitterness that, unlike in the Bible where Abraham is tested and he almost goes through with it, but is stopped by the angel of God. Owen is critiquing the sort of European forces that would sacrifice an entire generation of people for this military gain. And so he rewrites the story of Abraham and Isaac in a really interesting way, in a way that provokes the reader to think about this. I would say also that he uses this as kind of a controlling metaphor you see at the end. It's a big metaphor. So Abraham becomes a metaphor for sort of the culture of Europe that was militaristic and was putting its individual young people and that younger generation, which would represent Isaac, to slaughter in the war.